we are requiring that they utilize all available funds first, including federal, state, grants, and Medicaid funds. And after they've done everything that they can do, if they still have expenses that meet these requirements, they can request reimbursement from this fund. I really want to thank everybody that I've spoken to about this bill. It's been a great learning experience. I've been able to discuss a lot of different things related to special needs with many of you. I specifically want to thank the good lady from 32 who really helped me cross my T's, dot my I's, and make sure that things were right. The Attorney General's office was able to tell us and review this bill and let us know that there would be no legal concerns with it. 48 other states have a similar fund set up. Many of these states have different funding mechanisms in their regular education budget for special needs, but they still have this high needs fund because of the challenge that it presents in these unique cases. One school district I spoke to has a child who was being funded through Medicaid. It was brought to me that shouldn't Medicaid be paying for these things? And sometimes it's true, Medicaid does. When the parents of that child who had a high needs and IEP, it was costing around $60,000 to the school district, and Medicaid was funding most of it. But when the parents of that child no longer qualified for Medicaid, the funding went away. But the child didn't go away. The needs didn't go away. It was still there. I have worked with the Department of Education to make sure that the application process for this reimbursement is solid. They will have to show that they have requested all the funds available, that they have done the paperwork required to get any Medicaid funding that might be available, and do everything they can. And then they will still have to provide any documentation that the Department of Education might ask for in order to get this reimbursement. This is kind of special to me because I have a 9-year-old who's in the 3rd grade. I have 4 children, and 3 of them, my oldest is 16, my youngest is 9, and they're normal kids, right? They love to play, they love to razz each other, give each other a hard time, and that's what families do. And it was just the last few years, my 9-year-old, we discovered, had some behavioral issues at school, and it was becoming a challenge. And I began to learn more and more about what the schools do for kids who have unique situations, who have special needs. I feel blessed that my 9-year-old has issues that do not extend to the same level as other parents who fall in these high needs categories. But I just imagine if I was a parent of one of these children and I just want my kid to have a normal experience, to be able to be educated, to be able to learn. One child that I spoke of, the one that had the Medicaid funding, the school has been able to work with him and get him to a point where he's doing things now that his parents never thought would be possible. I know this is hard because we want to be very cautious with how we spend taxpayers' dollars. But I want to emphasize that this is money that is already being spent through requirements in law by these school districts and these charter schools. And we are simply trying to help alleviate the most expensive and extraordinary and things that are beyond the routine and normal costs associated with special education to make this possible and help out our parents and these children. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I would ask that you give me your green light and give these children your green light. Thank you.
You've heard the motions. Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to refer to pending legislation.
Unanimous consent has been requested to refer to pending legislation. Is there objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman may do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In committee, a lot of the problems that were being brought forward that this money could be used for dealt with ASL, which is sign language interpretation, and how we need 2 ASL instructors per student because it's a lot of work for these people to do this. We do have legislation coming that shifts that to a virtual ASL, which will cut back on some of the cost of having 2 people in office. So I'd just like to put that in your brain. Also, in committee, it was referenced that some of the current federal fundings we get for special education currently are being used to actually pay for residential care housing. In my opinion, we should not be paying for housing if we weren't paying $150,000 to house some special needs kids, as well as give them the education that they're owed through our constitutional agreements. That we would have these funds available to give to these kids without having to reallocate more money. So, it was mentioned from the good gentleman in 30 that, we want to spend our money wisely and be accountable. We're not being accountable with the funds that we're already receiving. And I'll keep going back to this because every time we come in here and we ask for more money, we're asking for it because the money we're currently getting is not going to the student or going to the place that it's supposed to go to. We've had many debates in here over the last week on accountability and budgets and being fiscally responsible. And yet every time we get one of these bills that wants to just keep throwing money at a problem because we're not spending the money right, we all vote yes. And we just keep throwing money at something instead of getting to the root cause of the problem and actually fixing the problem. If you want to fix the problem, if you want to give these kids the opportunity that are owed through our state, then let's start fixing the problem and let's take the money we're getting and using it properly, not just taking more money and throwing it at the problem. With that, I'll be a red light. Thank you.
For debate on the motion, gentleman from 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good gentleman sponsor stand for a question?
Would the gentleman yield to a question?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman from 30 yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman, do you have any idea, can you give us an idea of how much is already allocated for these special needs kids? Well, I fly back and forth from Spokane, and we've got several, for the 15 years I've been doing this, several of the same kids have been flying back and forth with me, coming down to a special school here. I have no idea how much that costs the state, but do you have any idea how much we're already spending on special needs facilities and children such as this?
Gentleman 30.
Thank you. Good gentleman from 3?
3.
3. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that. I don't know the specifics of every single child throughout the state of what is being spent on special needs and high needs. I do know that there's about an $80 million gap in what is allocated through federal funds, state funds, and other funding in there, and that it's spread out in very unique and random places. I don't know exactly how much is being spent per child in every single situation.
Mr. Speaker, another question, please.
Gentleman from 30 yields to additional question.
Happily yields.
Gentleman yields to an additional question.
Thank you. For clarity, this $80 million gap, how's that being, where are the funds for that coming from? From the parents?
Gentleman from 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman from 3, the gap is in the need. So currently the schools and the school districts are covering that gap through their normal budgeting process, which is what is causing a lot of the problems inside our schools with funding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman from 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate against the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good ladies and gentlemen. I think we just heard what this budget is going to be. We're proposing a $3 million, and they're claiming a need of $80 million. If you want to stick around for about 3 to 5 years, you'll see the budget blow up to $80 million. Because then it'll be, we've started this bucket, we've started it, we're not paying for all the needs are greater. This is a good way to grow government and to grow the program. If this program is really needed, it should be within the state's school budget. We give them $2 billion or even more than that. It might be 3, I think, by the time we get done. And if they can't find $3 million to help with the special kids in needs, then maybe they should relook at how they're spending their money. I know quite a while ago I talked to a gentleman whose wife was a teacher in special ed and said, I know that the kids with special needs get a substantial amount of money to pay for them. But she says, it's not in my classroom. It's going somewhere else. And so let's make sure that the money that's being allocated is going to the needs rather than creating their bucket. I think we've seen this with the reading initiative that started out, I think it was maybe around 5 million, 9 million, and now it's 72 million. This is exactly how you grow government. You hold them a little bit, pull on the heartstrings. It's not that I don't care about kids with special needs, but this is how you end up with a bloated budget, and I would urge you to vote no.
Further debate on the motion. Good lady from 34.
To debate the bill.
The lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to answer the question that the good gentleman from 3 had to start with. I believe the students he's referring to that are getting on planes and going somewhere else for school are traveling down to Idaho School for the Deaf and the Blind. And the budget for that particular portion, I believe it's about 100 students that go there, is just around $15 million a year. So that's a specific subset of the education budget that is not connected to this piece that we are debating today. But I wanted to make sure he got his question answered. We talk about growing government, and in the same breath, we also say that we want to reduce property taxes and local burdens on our school districts and to ensure that we don't have levies and bonds and things that put too much pressure on our local communities. This is not about new spending. This is about helping to alleviate the spending that is already happening in our school districts. So this concern about the potential that this fund could increase in size, well, I believe this year that this body has supported increasing property tax relief. So why wouldn't we be looking at other avenues to help offset property taxes by reducing the need for levies to help support the students who are in these school districts? By law, public schools have to accept every student that walks in the door, regardless of whether that student has their full capacity and ability to function on their own, or if that student requires 2 full-time aides to get through the school day. They're required to support the student that is able to move themselves throughout the course of the entire school day from class to class, or the student that has a tracheotomy that needs attending during the day. That is the law. And while I appreciate the concern about the growing of government, the reality is in this situation that these students already exist, their costs already exist, and this fund is an attempt to alleviate the burden on local districts. OPE found in its report that we fund roughly 5%, a little bit over, or assume that there's about 5% of special needs students in school districts. Their report found that that number is closer to 12%, as the good gentleman from 31 noted. There's wide variation. And some of those students come with a higher price tag. As a body, we are asked to weigh the relevancy of policy across a range of issues. And in this instance, this issue that we are being asked to weigh is whether or not the state is in a position to help offset these costs that already exist and are falling on property taxpayers in our communities. Property tax has consistently been the issue that comes up in conversation and that we have acted on. I would ask you why we are not looking at this legislation through that same lens, knowing that the school districts are relying on levies to help make up these bills because they are legally obligated to pay them. This is the last resort in terms of them coming to the state for funding, not the first, but the last. Let's show up for kids who did not choose to be disabled, who did not choose to have special needs, and do right by them. Let's provide them with a safe place to go and have an education, while at the same time helping the people that we represent offset some of the costs that currently reside with property taxpayers. I ask for your green light.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman from 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate against the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
And also, I would like to ask unanimous consent to read just a couple of 2 paragraphs from an email that was sent to me concerning this bill.
Unanimous consent to read a email sent to the good gentleman is requested. Is there objection? Hearing none, you may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good ladies and gentlemen of the body, I did have a educator from Valley View School District that does comprise part of my legislative district reach out to me asking for my support on this bill. And I do want to thank the good gentleman from District 30. I know he has a very big heart, and I appreciate the effort that he's put into this. Specifically to this email that was sent to me, I'd like to address 2 things that really kind of open my eyes, like what we're talking about for costs here for helping the high needs students. She cites that 2 students who attend West Ada Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, due to the need to access a teacher of the deaf and ASL interpreters that Valley View can't find. Cost to the district to educate 2 elementary students and provide bus transportation to Meridian is $65,200 a year. When these students reach high school age, the cost is going to increase to $69,200 per student per year. The other one I wanted to touch on, and thank you for allowing me to do so, the 12 students who require one-on-one behavior support due to physical aggression resulting in numerous room clears and trauma to other students in the classroom receives individualized behavioral intervention services, specialized instruction, and medical accommodations during the school day. These families do not have Medicaid coverage or will not provide permission for the district to bill Medicaid. Cost to the district for this year is $367,466 to deal with 12 students. And I saw those numbers and I was absolutely blown away. And I understand that everything that the government injects money into is typically going to be inflated to a higher cost. But again, this is being borne on the taxpayers of our district. And the only reason that these taxes exist and that these taxes are funded by these people is because there is a threat of fine or potential imprisonment if they fail to pay their taxes, or if they decide, I'm not going to pay my taxes anymore. Guess who's coming after them? The IRS and the State Tax Commission. So this isn't a government charity program. And I would like to remind all the good members of the body that we need to be very careful and responsible with the money that we're spending that is being borne on not just out of our paychecks, but our future, the future of our children and our grandchildren are also going to have to pay for this. So I'm going to have to be a no vote on this bill.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman from 28.
Mr. Speaker, debate in favor of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of this body, this is not charity or welfare. This is required by law. We have to provide it. It's just a matter of how we provide it. There was a Supreme Court case a few years back that said that the state and this body is not doing the proper amount of funding for schools, public schools. This is one of the areas where we are falling short. You cannot expect the local government or the local county property taxpayers to pick up this bill. It is not their responsibility, it is ours. I ask you to and urge you for a green light on this.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and body.
Would the good gentleman like to debate the
I
bill?
would like to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Good body, I agree with the good gentleman from 28. This is not a charity thing. This is our responsibility to our public educators and our kids. This is a need that we can't ignore. We can't kick the can down the road and wait for the state education system to be fixed. If there's an issue, we need to step in and fix it. But that's not going to happen this year, I'm guessing, or next year, possibly. We have a small chance now to hand them a small portion, to give them a leg up on the needs that these kids have. I have a special needs grandson, and this is an issue, and it's expensive. It's really expensive. School districts are at their wits' end on what to do. They can't pay for enough classified people to come in and help these programs out. So if we could offer a small token, which is pennies compared to the other budgets we talk about, and help them out, at least in the short term, I think we'd be doing our kids a good service. I will support this vote.
Further debate on the motion. Good lady from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you. And as I debated yesterday, these students are our most vulnerable students that we have in our districts. And just one of my districts, the largest one, Lewiston, when I spoke with the superintendent back a couple months ago, and then again recently, he reminded me that he said every one-on-one student costs the district $50,000. every one-on-one. Every two-on-one students cost the district $100,000. And currently, they are serving 2 students that are two on one, so 2 aides to 1 student, and 25 students that need one-on-one aides in their district. That is over $1,450,000 before we talk about every other 504 IEP that are kids that don't have this severe of needs. So in the bill that we recently passed, House Bill 93, that's signed into law, in that bill, we pay $7,500 for kids that have disabilities. So in Lewiston, after all the amounts, they are getting $4,900 per student in their district. So there, right there, is a huge gap and an unfair amount of money. So I urge you to think about that. When the good gentleman who brought this from 30, as he is saying, these are our kids that we are required by law to help, to educate, whether they're in a wheelchair and they can't function, whether they have to go to special ed for many hours a day. There are things that are required because they come through the door, and we take every child who comes through the door, which you can imagine how difficult that can be on some of our smaller school districts. And this is my largest district, but this is the same thing. When I met with all the superintendents from District 6 and some from District 7 came to Moscow, and I sat down with them for 2.5 hours. And every one of them talked about the gap that they had in the funds that they have to take from their discretionary funds or from other funds that they have from the school district to cover these costs, because the feds don't cover it all and the state doesn't cover it all. So these kids that they are required to educate just in Lewiston, and the $1,450,000 is just for a handful of the students that they have to educate. So folks, we keep continuing to say the money's not getting to the kids. Well, if the money's going to teachers to teach these kids, or to the aides that can come in and have to be spit on and kicked, and all the things that happen in the disruptions with children that have disabilities, whether they're mental disabilities or physical disabilities. So I would urge you to think about that. I told you the story about raising 2 grandkids, one of which had some severe behavioral problems when they came in 1st and 3rd grade. And he was on an IEP his whole time, but he wasn't severe like these kids. But if you think about, and if you would sit down with your superintendents and the teachers and ask them, how many disability children do you serve? And the good gentleman from 7 talked about some residential things, and I would suspect that there's some, I know that Lewiston pays some costs to get their kids to and from the airport to get down to the School of the Deaf and the Blind. And yes, we're going to see some legislation that will help with some of the interpreters, but that is not what we're talking about here. Many of these children are so severe that they have to have two aides with them all day long. And it is that school's responsibility. They can't say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your child. So we have to remember how important that is, and that we, every bucket of money that you're saying, okay, this bucket of money goes to teachers, this bucket of money goes to this and this and that. And that's true, there's a lot of different buckets. But this bucket, and you can't take money sometimes from one bucket to another, as we all know that in government finance that you just can't do that. So there's only certain places where they can take this. So I would urge you to really consider how this would be if this was one of your children, one of your grandchildren that was suffering, and they were going to public school and they needed this assistance. The school's got to come up with it because they, by law, are responsible to take care of these kids. So I would urge your green light to help our kids, the most vulnerable of all of our children in the state. Thank you.
For debate on the motion. Hearing no. Oh, good lady from 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you. So I just want to really appreciate some of the sentiments that have already come forward about the responsibility and where the buck stops with regards to paying for special education. And I think there are some people in here who believe that Idaho could somehow lower these costs, or that we could refuse services to some of these high needs students. And I want to be very clear that the law that provides for these services is still going to apply, no matter what happens at the federal level or here at the state level. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that law as somebody that deals with it quite often. So the law is called the Individuals with Disability Education Act, right? IDEA. And as educators, we call this the Students with Disabilities Bill of Rights. And I just want to talk about a couple of those and the cases that have been brought before the Supreme Court recently to uphold those time and time again. Number one, a free, appropriate public education, FAPE is what we call it, is one of these Bill of Rights, that the schools must provide education at no cost to the parents. Education must actually help the student learn and progress. Now, the Supreme Court has, since 1988, upheld FAPE over and over again, the first ruling being Board of Education versus Rowley. Number two, mandate to find. And this is an important one. Schools must actively look for students who might need special education services. They cannot wait until a parent brings it to them, and they must evaluate students once they are found, and they must include students in private schools and homeschoolers. So in 2009, the Supreme Court ruled in a case in which a young man was not evaluated by the public school and the parents took him to a private school, that the state, as the obligatory entity and the local school district as the provider of the services, was in fact on the hook for those costs. And in this state today, because that has been upheld multiple times since 2009, we pay special needs services to our students in private schools and homeschools. Number three, the IEP, the Individual Education Plan. Every eligible student gets their own plan. It's like a roadmap for students. And in 2017, the Supreme Court in Idaho versus Douglas County School District even broadened that to say that IEPs have to be ambitious and challenging for every student that receives them. Ambitious and challenging. So to the point about Mr. Mason, who testified from Twin Falls about a student who was in a residential care facility, that residential care facility falls under the Supreme Court decision of Endow versus Douglas County School District. This is the eligibility, the individualized education plan that is provided to that student no matter. Number four, also on that topic, the least restrictive environment. It has been deemed time and time again that the best thing for our students is to be in a least restrictive environment. Students should be with their peers as much as possible. A school must justify removal from a regular classroom, and support services must go to the student when possible. So to the ASL virtual, it may come down to a court case. As a parent, I may have a problem with that if I don't feel that my IDEA rights are being met for my student. Olmstead versus LC went further and said that students not only need LREs when they're in school, but also outside of school. And then in a 1999 decision, Cedar Rapids versus Garnet F requires schools to provide any necessary medical services needed for a student to attend school as much as humanly possible. This too has been upheld multiple times. 5, parent rights. Parents are equal as a team member in a child's special needs learning, they must give permission and they can challenge school decisions. In 2017, in a case, Fry versus Napoleon Community Schools, it gave specific authority to parents to sue LEAs. Those are those local entities of which the state education agency, in our case that would be the Idaho State Board of Education, is the obligatory party. So anytime a parent feels they are not having the needs met under that federal law, IDEA, they have the right to sue, and it is that state entity that is on the hook for it. Number 6, the transition planning. We must create a plan for a meaningful life after school. It must include college, work, or independent living goals, and it must involve the student in the planning. These are the basic rights for students with disabilities. They are as fundamental as the Bill of Rights for the broader American public. And so for clarity on who's going to be on the hook for expenses for public education, IDEA mandates that each state designate one entity in order to make sure that all of this happens in accordance with the law and that other entities can help deliver those services, but that one entity is on the hook for it. And that is, in Idaho, the state education, right? The Idaho State Department of Education. And so we must continue to fund our special needs communities, because we really only have 2 choices. We can either fund special education or we can fund special education and lawsuits. Those are our 2 choices. The Supreme Court has devolved a lot of its power over the last 30 years back to the states. In this specific instance, every single time the Supreme Court and the federal courts have maintained their supremacy over what is good for our children with disabilities. And they will continue to do so no matter what happens at the federal level. And our parents will demand such of us. And so I urge you to help make sure that we have the money available for when our special needs population not only needs this money, but when our parents demand it of us.
Further debate on the motion. Lay from 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate.
Goodlay has the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that was the best testimony I think I've heard on this floor in 11 years. Very well said. And I learned so much from what you just shared that I had no idea about. That being said, I think we can find the funding from somewhere else. I'm not going to vote for this, but those are real problems that we're going to deal with in our schools. And I was very unaware, and I just wanted to compliment the good lady for her testimony.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate against the bill.
Has the floor.
All right, thank you. I just want to take a step back here and kind of take a different approach at this. My mom was a teacher for almost 40 years, public, private, special needs. On the other side of the coin, my dad worked as a fiscal analyst for the Health and Human Services in San Francisco for the federal government. And he went around auditing Head Start programs. This is over 30 years ago. Later, he went on to auditing Head Start programs across our territories globally. At one point, over 30 years ago, in auditing a Head Start program in New York, Head Start, teaching kids how to color, brush their teeth, those things while their parents are working, they were paying $20,000 to $25,000 per child at that time. That was more than a Stanford education at that time. How does that happen? I come here and I'm watching these things kind of unfold. I'm hearing these stories, just heard the story about a child, and all these situations are horrible, by the way. We have an obligation, but we are basically helping a broken system. We are enabling a broken system to the point where apparently we are paying for housing for students through education. Another billion here. Our second largest budget, $3+ billion. Another billion will do it. Another program here, another 5 to 10 million here. This one will do it. We see how these things are progressing. We are destroying ourselves incrementally. The buck stops here. We have to find a way to utilize, as many others have said, the funds that we have allocated already to adjust. within this broken system, but we cannot keep doing this. And I'm definitely a red light on this, but we have to find a better way because we are enabling a broken system.
For debate on the motion. Hearing none, would the good gentleman care to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, everyone. I really, truly appreciate your engagement. Would have been fun to take this on this morning, huh? Just a couple things. I want to refocus us for just a moment, please, because I am so grateful for the things that came up that has shined a light on the need for us to pay a little more attention to the special needs education in our state. But this bill is not about all special education needs. This bill is about the high needs of some unique students whose costs are unduly expensive, extraordinary, and beyond the routine and normal costs associated with special needs. This is a reimbursement fund. This is not funding special needs in our state. That is a whole nother conversation that I am excited to one day have, and I think we primed it here today. 48 other states have this fund. Our sister state to the south, Utah, they fund special needs through their normal funding, much differently than we do. But they still have a high needs fund with about $4.5 million in it. And as the good gentleman from 22 brought up, that does not change without appropriations. We're not trying to fill the $80 million gap with this bill. We are trying to help in those extraordinary cases as a reimbursement, a last result for these schools. Please consider the needs that our schools have, the needs that our students are, these special needs children have, and know that this bill has been vetted and is proper for our state. And I please ask you for your green light.
Thank you. Debate is closed. Question is, shall House Bill 291 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine. The members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Guys, put the cameras up and vote. We'd be done with it. Has any members changed their vote? Clerk will lock the machine and record the roll and report the pair.
Achilles votes aye. Skog votes nay.
36 ayes, 34 nays, the majority having voted in favor of House Bill 291. House Bill 291 is passed the House. Is there correction to title?
No correction to title.
Hearing none, the title is approved and the bill will be transmitted to the Senate. The House will now have before it House Bill 386. Good lady from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So everybody take a deep breath. This is a much easier bill. So House Bill